Good morning. Welcome to MEDIASPACE, part of the Euronet series of programs. And today we have a slightly different program in that we are streaming on the web as we did the last version, but this time we'll also be having some guests in the studio because we're combining this program and the initial workshop for this program with the official launch of the Plymouth Reflections website. This is part of the Millennium Celebrations for Plymouth, and we'll be taking you through the building of this website for the first half. And then for the actual launch, we'll be joined by members of the project, hopefully members of the press, and Tudor Evans, who's the leader of City Council, to actually launch the venture. So what we're actually going to do with this program is take you through a whole series of steps and use the Plymouth Reflections website as a case study. So anybody who's been looking at these programs before will be familiar with the Reflections website, and please call in if you like, and also ISDN in. These are the numbers we have here in the background. I'll just step back. The ISDN is it's ISDN 2, which is 01752 260031. And to telephone into the TV studio, it's 01752 233 646. You can also email MEDIASPACE on mediaspace@soc.plym.ac.uk. And you can see this broadcast on the web, along with all the other material that we're using, on the Plymouth Reflections website, which is currently streaming through. We can also see it on the MEDIASPACE website, which is part of the Kaya Star website. We've been using kayastar.soc.plym.ac.uk. Now we've got our own domain name, which is kaya-star.net. And all of that, including the Reflections website, are based on that server. So the Plymouth Reflections website is www.plymouth-reflections.net. So I hope you're viewing this either on the website, one of those two websites, or indeed via the satellite. The Plymouth Reflections website is based on the Kaya Star server, and Star are actually helping assemble this project, but it involves the whole of the Plymouth community and is linked with organisations based in Plymouth City Council. But obviously you're familiar with this, the Euronet site if you've tuned in before. This is the front end of the Reflections website, and we'll be talking you through its construction as we move through this programme. The Plymouth Reflections website has been developed over a period from the turn of this century, the turn of the new millennium, and we're incorporating many of the ventures that are linked to the Reflections celebration, Plymouth's celebrations of the millennium, which is focused on this website. Now this is part of the overall Britain's Millennium celebrations, and funding for the Reflections website came from the Millennium Commission, which is all part of the Millennium Festival. Okay, so what we're going to do is take you through the initial part of this website, but first of all I'll just talk about the logo because it symbolises a lot of the issues to do with the Reflections website. It's all part of the people story. We have here the logo, which was created using images, three faces combined to tell the past, the present and the future. And these, at various times through the website, become integral in the communication of this message and also of the community message that we're trying to bring together through the site. Now, the Reflections website incorporates many assets which have been collected from the museum, TSW, Film Archive, but also the library and many other assets that have been drawn from Plymouth's central resources. But we're also involving schools and community centres to actually get a real live online community. The collaborators in this venture, some of them can be seen on the website here, the museum and the community centres partnership. But really the key thing about this is that underpinning all of these activities and all of these organisations is a desire that the people of Plymouth should have some control over establishing a dialogue and a discourse with this whole venture. Because without it, we're just putting together a website. Without their input, this whole venture will become just an authored website without having the dynamics of a live production where individuals can contribute to the whole. Now, many of the assets, as I was saying, have been drawn from the resources that are available in Plymouth. These here, for instance, are from the TSW archive, and they can be seen on the website. But maybe we should go and have a look at the website now. So if we could move to George's machine in the chroma key, and we'll take you through that right now. Here we go. Okay, this is the Plymouth Reflections website. It's just been revamped. And we'll be talking you through exactly how this works, but it consists of a number of frames, one at the top and one at the bottom there. This is the main navigation down the bottom here, you can see that there, and these are all the sections. And the top bar here just reflects the current sections that you're in. So these are the collaborators with this project, the University of Plymouth, STAR, TSW, the museum and the library. And also several organisations like the local newspapers and news institutions. We have here a Millennium timetable. All of the events that are happening around the city can be seen on this timetable. It will be changing and updated as things change, as inevitably they will do. And also the main contacts for this project, and we'll be talking to some of those. Let's move across here. We'll be talking to some of those very soon in this programme. Okay, now where it starts getting interesting is when we start having a discourse with the people, with the community. And here we have some members of the community. They're actually students from the Media Lab Arts course, and very attractive bunch they look too. And this Reflections people is really what we're trying to establish as being the main core of this project. There are a whole series of events that we're trying to link through to this, to do with people communicating with other Plymouths around the world, people talking to each other, people remembering the city as it existed in the past. Plymouth's quite interesting because it was revolutionized by the bombings during the war. It is a modernist city. It was built from the ground upwards. But one of the side effects of that maybe is that the community has become rather dispersed. Here we have the plans for the show at the museum, which will be taking place, I think, from May, June, July for the rest of the year. The site contains the information on the themes of the city, living and dying, shopping, a whole range of themes that have been conjured up to describe Plymouth's main activities and the life of the people within it. And this has been drawn together by a group of researchers who are collecting assets from the people of Plymouth, assets like artifacts that they remember and find, and bringing together a real live discussion about what constitutes modern-day Plymouth based on its memories. Okay, time capsules are rather important at the turn of the millennium. Here we have a digital time capsule. It's currently set to 7,000, 6,000. We're moving back in time to the year 2000. That's the secret code for that. Oh, you missed it, Georgie. I think this one needs slightly modifying, but this site here takes you through all of the different assets that have been contributed by members of the community. In this case, the community is the school community, and we're trying to establish communication through a whole range of schools around Plymouth city centre. And when we get to 2000, whoa, there we go. We should move into the next section. The next section contains many assets which have been collected, which represent the current day of Plymouth. And we'll be talking about how we actually constructed the three-dimensional aspects of this very soon. Okay, so we have a whole range of activities going on. We have the themes which have been generated through the relationship with the museum. We have here a timeline as well, which lists many of the assets that we've collected. Here you can see some of the key assets which we've drawn from the TSW archive, a whole range of photographs from the library, and the idea is that people can then comment on these. Underpinning this whole event is a database which sits on this computer, which allows people to post up images and then link themselves to those images and contribute information, memories about those artifacts. Okay. One of the central issues of the site is the notion of mapping the city. You may be familiar with this short video sequence which is going on here. We've talked about it before. But we've involved schools, members of the community, in quite a dynamic mapping of Plymouth City as it is. And what's interesting about Plymouth City is if you look at the memories people have of it, the dynamic change that happened during the war here, there's areas of Plymouth which have been covered up, which only exist in people's memory. On here we have a map which we're dealing with part of the section of Plymouth schools that are taking place in Plymouth's Grid for Learning. And here you can see some assets which have been drawn by kids based on this map here. We're asking children to contribute photographs, drawings, sketches, ideas about Plymouth, their favourite buildings, and we're mapping that in Plymouth on this map here. This is interactive, so people can call up new images, and we'll be able to post up new images and email contributions to it. This piece here was constructed in Shockwave, and we'll be looking at a little bit of Shockwave for the time capsule element of this later in the program. One of the elements that we're quite proud of here in Plymouth is that Plymouth seems to have been the start of many other communities that exist around the world. And I think there are about 40 Plymouths distributed all over the world. And we have a global map here onto which we are mapping those cities, and you'll be able to communicate directly with members of those communities. For instance, schools will be able to get in touch with other schools at other Plymouths around the world. And they'll be able to input data and talk to each other through video conferencing. Now, another element of the whole Reflections project is the arts activities. And this, at the moment, is a list of activities and a plan which we'll be putting into action over this year. But this includes relationships with Warner Brothers and showing films which have a link and a connection to Plymouth. So in many ways, this city that we're looking at here, Plymouth, has been recreated virtually on this website, both in terms of mapping, both in terms of a community, and we'll be looking at Plymouth's past, Plymouth's present, and hopefully defining some of Plymouth's future. Okay, so this all takes place through the central navigation system here, and we'll be talking about this site's construction right now. So we're going to look at some of these issues here. If we move to My Machine again, Dave. Here we go. Some of these assets that we'll be looking at have all been constructed using, or put together using Dreamweaver, which the course has mainly been about over the last few months. We'll be looking at image manipulation using Photoshop. Previously, we've used Fireworks to assemble the photographic images and the design images. We'll be looking at Image Ready this week, a little bit more. And Fireworks there. And we'll also be looking at some of the video compression tools that we've used, for instance, to construct the assets that we have, the video assets that we have, but also maybe a little bit dealing with some of the compression issues that we're looking at on the server. The server itself is streaming using a QuickTime streaming server, and this uses a real-time compressor, which is actually based on another machine. The whole setup that we have for this streaming video is a little bit indirect in that we're also receiving the satellite image and then rebroadcasting it out over the server, and it's sitting on a machine, the compressor's sitting on another machine, which then links to the server and streams it out. We're currently using, if I can remember the codec, it's H.263. We've previously used Sorensen, so we're trying something new today which gives us a much larger frame rate, but also does some interesting things with the size of the movie, and also resolves, hopefully, some of the issues to do with the background that you can see here. We're hoping that static images become much clearer as they are reinforced on the frame rate. So we'll be looking at QuickTime a little bit and the compression of that, and we'll actually have a workshop towards the end of this program, which will be building up the introduction and the method that we're launching the actual project with, and a couple of browsers, Netscape and Explorer. Okay, so I'm going over here to Georgie, and we're going to look at his website, and he'll take you through this section now. So see you in a minute.
Okay, now we're going to be looking at some...
Hi, we're back again. Today we're going to be looking at some of this construction of the assets that we've collected over the Reflections website. And indeed, we only have a few there at the moment, and we'll be bringing in more as hopefully a discussion builds up on the databases that we have and also the bulletin boards and communications technology we have. This is one of those assets. This has been drawn from the library, and this here is this image here was collected from the library along with all the other assets we have, and as you can see, it's actually of part of Plymouth. When was this constructed?
1945.
1945. You can find it in the timeline on the server in 1945, and this is what Plymouth used to look like. Gosh. Now if we can cut to George's machine here, you'll be able to see that he's scanned that image in, and now we're looking at how we can actually deal with processing that image. So what are you going to do with this image, Georgie?
Right, well, first of all, we need to make it smaller because for web compression. So we're going to look at the size of the image first of all, and we need to take that down to probably about 400 across, make it a bit smaller. So first of all, just change the image size. So now we've got a smaller image.
This image was originally scanned at something like 300 dpi?
Yeah, and then we have to take it down. And there's a lower image there, but yeah, we've got to take it down to a lower resolution.
The resolution that most screens use is about 72 dpi.
Yeah, so then we've just got to look at the actual size to put it on the screen.
This fits into a template that you've constructed already using Dreamweaver.
So then we can, once we've got the image done, then we can go put it through to Image Ready.
Previously we've used Fireworks. What's the difference between Image Ready and Fireworks?
It's more tightly integrated with Photoshop, so you can save things in both formats, and it can open up in both formats and save settings. So you can split the frame up and stuff.
Well, what we've done in previous broadcasts is look at the construction of an image and then dividing it up, in originally generating it in Photoshop and then putting it into Fireworks and slicing it up. In Fireworks, you have a whole range of tools, same as you do in Photoshop, which is layering and image processing. But the nice thing about Image Ready, in this case here, is that integration between taking a photograph or an image from Photoshop and then putting it into Image Ready is much tighter, enabling you to then crop through the layers that you've established using Photoshop. Yeah,
so you don't have to flatten your image, so you can keep all your information there, change the image, but still keep all your settings. So then we can go to optimize the background by clicking here, and you can select different settings. For a picture, we can select a JPEG. We can then change the quality to affect the size of the image, which will come up here. It's 17K at the moment, but you have to weigh up the amount you can see in comparison to the image size. So we'll go for 40. It's 20K, but that's a reasonable quality.
You probably can't see this very clearly on using a PAL monitor.
Yeah.
But if you do look at a web page, you can tell the quality of the image that have been used. That optimization between the look of a photograph and the size of the photograph is key to getting a smooth balance through the way a website flows. If it's too large, then it takes too long to download. However, if it's a very high quality, then maybe that wait is worthwhile.
Right, and then we can just save the optimized picture. Which you've got different options. You can save it with slice names, lots of options, so you can speed up your process of re-outputting, but we can just save it as a straight file name. And
in terms of slicing, that's just the technique of dividing up a complex image to...
Yeah, you can draw slices on quite easily just by, say you wanted a few images, so you can do rollovers, just slice the picture up, and then you can have rollovers over these images, change the image so it comes up with different images. So it all can be set, all animation can be done in here. So yeah, everything can be done.
It saves an awful lot of time when you're generating web pages when you have this kind of integration of the image tool. Previously this would have to be done using basic HTML and JavaScript. What we do is generally put this into Dreamweaver, which then compiles all of those elements.
Right.
Okay, so now we have our image. Let's look at putting it into... Is it Dreamweaver we're going to now?
Yeah, we can go to Dreamweaver now.
If the machine hasn't crashed?
No, it's just running slightly slow. Let's get out of these programs.
Right.
So now we can open up Dreamweaver. Right, now first of all, if we wanted to start creating a similar document to the website, we could split the frames up. So first of all, we can split the frame up and split the frame, the bottom frame up as well. So then we can actually create a navigation bar down the bottom and images at the top. So first of all, we can open up a web page in this frame, which can be of what we've done before. If I can find it here. I think it's easiest to go to this one.
Frames have always seemed to be extremely complex, but Dreamweaver handles them very nicely. Effectively, they simply handle different HTML pages within one overall page.
So then we can select, for instance, the timeline heading of the page. Which won't have the pictures yet because it's in a different relative position. But what we can do is select where these images are by going to the properties. If you can find it, I think they've disappeared off the page because my saying that we change the size of the picture. So let's have a look. We can now import our picture off the desktop.
There we go.
Now that would be in our frame, and we can align that in the center and have a different selection of text. So we now have 3 frames, and the top frame. Let's just open that picture again. So now we have the top frame, which contains a heading and a middle, and now if we wanted to, we could open a navigation bar in the bottom frame so that the full page is shown. There we go. So now we have our layout of the original website, and we can have information on that picture below. And
I'll just talk through some of this frame, if I can just nip into the chroma key bit here. If we switch to George's machine on the chroma key, you can see that the frame construction is very simple in terms of the incorporation of those HTML pages. Usually people work with static HTML pages, which would place an image at the top, this image in the middle, and then the images at the bottom there. Now that's useful, but that means that every page you do has to incorporate all of these images, and it can take quite a lot of work. The idea of using frames is that each frame contains its own HTML page, which is being prepared earlier. So the HTML page, which contains this timeline section here, this image here, and this is a separate section. How many images have we got at the top here altogether?
Oh yeah, we have it split up into the corner image, the top animation GIF, then the heading, and a graphic underline. The reason you split them up is because these images, once they've been loaded into memory, then they can stay there, and then it will save time when you keep going back to the pages that you only have to change this heading. So only one image has to be changed.
Right. So uploading things is a lot quicker off the server by having this as a static, separate web page. Now, this web page here is obviously the image that we've collected, but in many cases, the functionality of this section here changes with virtually every page on the server, whereas this section here remains constant. This navigation bar here has a number of rollovers in it. Can we see it in a web browser now, just to call that up?
You can, yeah.
So we'll load it into a web browser, hopefully. I think you just have to save it.
Yeah, it might have problems with the relative positions. Let's just save it.
Saving this is important because all of these separate elements at the moment are in different folders, and we haven't established a central folder for that. So that's why this originally looked like the images were missing from the top section.
The middle image should be there, it's fine.
Right.
So
Okay,
that's what we get.
This is now looking at it in Netscape, and you can see all of the different sections, and you can also see the functionality of the menu bar working down the bottom here. This is extremely useful because the generation of each one of these pages now takes a lot less time, because we're not worried about incorporating all of this information and redoing it all the time. One of the problems, for instance, with these sections down here, which are little Java rollovers, if we could just go across those, what these actually do, and maybe we could look through that in a second, is these individual elements here are two separate images which use a Java rollover to generate this image over here to change this image here. Right, so when you roll over that, this image changes. Now, to do that every time for every single page of the project would take forever. So by generating this generic HTML page at the bottom, this generic HTML page at the top with the different title sequences in, just means that you have a much quicker, speedier process. Now, underlying all of this work on the server is some database technology called OpenBase, which has been very kindly given to the Plymouth Reflections web project. And this section here will allow us to incorporate all of this database information that we've collected, databases which have been drawn and based on images as well as the video, not just text information, which can then be incorporated into these live web pages. So in effect, every time you call up a new asset on the Reflections website, the asset will be generated on the fly by the OpenBase database. And we'll be talking about that in later programs because it's rather complex. And unfortunately, because the KaiStar server is using Mac OS X, which is basically a Unix kernel, a Unix machine, we can't show you the OpenBase program. It has to all be done on that server. It's a server-side activity. Okay, Georgie, what we're going to do, look at some image work now? Look at some video work.
Okay. Right. Now, compressing the image videos, we use Media Cleaner. Now what we can do is, we've got a selection, we've got one video here. What we can do is just drop that onto Media Cleaner. This is one of the movies which we can compress for output in a streaming video from the website. What we do is output a selection of movies, each individually selected for their speed, so when people connect at lower connections, they can still connect and see the video, and also high connections, their high-speed connections, they can get a higher quality image. So it gives us a kind of variation.
This is the main functionality of the QuickTime streaming server, is that it allows the person who's receiving the video on their computer to balance the speed and the quality of the video by telling their QuickTime control panel, which if you use QuickTime, which most browsers incorporate as standard, it allows them to instruct their control panel how fast their connection is. And connection speeds vary incredibly. So for instance, a lot of people still have 28K modems, others use 56K modems, the faster ones which are now available. Others might be using ISDN, or indeed, if you're a corporate user, you probably have a LAN or a T1 connection. And now, by using Media Cleaner, you can actually compress a whole range of files which have different types of characteristics. By outputting those, the control panel tells the server how fast your connection is. The server then delivers an appropriate speed and size for your computer. You can, of course, download higher level movies as well, but in order to get the streaming, the real-time video, then this method is most appropriate.
Right, well what we can do is there's different options. On here it's got a settings wizard which you can go through, which is quite easy to use. And you select your different media, QuickTime media, and then you've got a selection. You've got either the QuickTime streaming, which is, as we've been saying, so you can get instant access to it. But then if you wanted slightly higher quality ones, you could have, you can either have real-time, or actually what you want is a high-quality progressive download. So you can have a different selection of higher quality ones. So you can actually select still, for instance, 3 or 4 settings for different modems, and it will still give you a higher quality, take slightly longer, but still be appropriate for each connection. So
These configurations, if you just go back to
Yeah.
the last one, the kind of balancing you can get through something like Media Cleaner is a balance between having no soundtrack at all to having audio being the most important, in which case the frame rates might be dropped of the images, but the quality of the sound is maintained, or indeed the video being most important, so the audio can skip and keep up, but also a balance between both. Now, obviously, the different kinds of codecs or the different kinds of compressors that are incorporated into these various video technologies are important to the quality of that image. So if you have high quality compression of sound and high quality compression of video, then that will make the whole thing much larger and download time will be increased.
Yeah.
Now this affects also, depending on the download time, the frame rate that you're actually viewing the QuickTime movie through. There are, of course, a whole range of different types of video compressors around. Real-time servers are available, but those are fairly expensive, whereas the QuickTime, being a generic tool for most platforms, allows this kind of simple compression to be distributed most widely. So if you're watching this at the moment on the website, you're looking at this using a real-time codec, which is streaming it through that QuickTime. Hopefully you'll have QuickTime 4, which allows you to optimize that frame rate. But if you haven't, you can still view this, I think, using QuickTime 3. Is that?
I think you might be able to, yeah. Right, so then we've got different other settings which you can select, which are appropriate for what you want.
For instance, you can fade it from black up to...
You can have fade from white, so you can select, so it fits in with your web page. Then what it gives you is a selection of movies. We each have their individual rates and settings, which are grouped. And what that does is it'll produce 5 movies in the end, and the 5th movie will be a master movie, which you will access, and it will call up the appropriate movie for you.
So this is 5 separate movies from the same movie that you started with?
Yeah, well, it produces 4 and gives you the 5th one. Will actually choose the relevant movie. So when we start doing this, it'll produce a batch, and does it all for you. You can have a big batch. You can have as many movies as you want. You can have different grouped movies, and it'll do up to 256 movies at once or whatever. So yeah. So
on the left here, we actually have the video that you can see, and on the right we can have the 2 sections, which are the before and the after components. So if we can switch to the chroma key, here we have the before section, and this is a black and white movie, so unfortunately you're not going to see the advantages of this. But normally this split up the middle here gives you an indication of what the movie looked like before and what it looked like after. The different algorithms that generate the stripping away of information to compress a movie also allow you to optimize sound quality, normalize that quality so that you actually get a very crisp, clear sound. So for instance, with voices, slightly different settings with music, but with voices you probably want a lower quality sound but sharper so that you can actually hear the articulation of words. So this is now going through that movie, stripping it down. You can see all the processing going on at the bottom here, and moving through frame by frame. And how long is that going to take altogether, Georgie?
Well, this one would take, it says here like it's got about 4 minutes left on this one. So it gives you the amount of time and etc. So I mean, a lot of these take a lot of time, but because it takes a lot of time, the user gets the benefit due to the fact that it's a high level of compression, but it takes more powerful computers to produce the output at the other end. So.
Okay.
Right.
So now shall we look at incorporating some of these videos into Dreamweaver?
We can do.
We go to the timeline page and maybe look at one of the constructions there.
Let's just cancel this compression and quit out of here. Relatively easy to integrate these movies due to Dreamweaver's plugin inserts. So we can just open up off the desktop. Let's go to the timeline. And we can open up the main page. This, what you get produced is 3 HTML files. Obviously, you've got the frame set, then you've got your other HTML files. You have 4 HTML files for each frame set. You've got your frame set file, then you've got your 3 files in there. So then what we can do is open up the relevant frame in here. So let's say open up from the timeline 1961 to 70. And what we have in there is the plugin, which we can put in again. Let's get rid of that. And then by inserting a plugin, we can then find the movie that we want, which is in the videos. And then what we insert into the page is, here you have the different selections. So you have the 4 different compression settings.
Those compression settings are what, 28?
Yeah, 28, 56K, ISDN, and T1. And then what we put in is the master movie. Can't see the full name there, but there it is. You put the master movie in. So open that up, set it to the appropriate size.
Again, this would have been set previously. You'd know exactly what size you're compressing these to.
Yeah. So then when you've got your appropriate size, then that will be able to be played due to the fact we haven't got our properties bar because the screens are a different size. So once that in there, we can preview that in the browser then.
Okay, so here
and
comes
then that
the
will
video.
show up in there, in that frame.
This is actually the Beatles arriving in Plymouth. 1963. Takes you back, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. So that's what you get.
Now, again, probably a lot of this is being lost through the conversion of the computer image to PAL here, but you can actually see some of the pixelation that's occurring in this compression. So for instance, that photograph that was just held up there, the faces actually became very blurred. And there's some really interesting things happen through the pixelation that happens during a compressed film. So for instance, Paul McCartney just became a bit of a blur there.
Right.
There they are.
Jolly good.
So let's move on.
Okay.
Okay, now we said that we'd have a quick look at the 3D work that you were doing using
Let's have a
Director.
quick look.
So
Let's quit out of here.
okay, we're going to be looking now at constructing the timeline, not the timeline, the time capsule, or the vault as we've called it here, which contains all of the elements. And we're just going to take you very quickly through before we move on to the initial stages of the launch part of this program, where we'll be talking to James Norwood.
Now this is the page which should have shown when it comes, which will be live, but it doesn't work locally due to the links in the Director movies. But this is a movie created in Director which shows some of the clips from Beatles movie, which is being put into a 3-dimensional form, and so you can interact with it and look at the different pictures. I mean, there can be many different forms. You can travel through the images. Depends how you set up the relevant positions in 3D space. So this is all set up through a local. You've got your initial positions.
This is complicated coding, isn't it?
Yeah,
Georgie?
there's quite an in-depth amount of coding in all this, but what we have, the main section as well. I mean, you have the creation, so you have these all create the different positions in the box. There's a lot of numbers, letters, and other things.
It's like maths to me, Georgie.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers, but all this makes it go round basically, and it's quite complicated, but it's not that complicated if you actually think about it.
We'll be publishing some of this code for those who want to join in with the 3D material on the web page as well. So a lot of the infrastructure behind the Reflections website, part of it, and certainly the links with the National Grid for Learning exercise, which we're talking through workshops with schools and things, means that we're trying to demystify some of this process as well. So one of the reasons we've been doing this and linked through the Euronet is that the intention of this whole series of programs is to help people get to grips with some of this technology. Okay. Thanks, Georgie.
Right.
We're going to now move on to James who, after the short break. So roll BT and we'll be over to James in a minute. Hi then, we're back again I think, and we're with James Norwood here, who's going to be taking us through something that was actually shown on the launch of the Reflections, the whole of Plymouth Reflections project, which included the first weekend celebrations, which was shown on the large screen at Plymouth Hoe. And this is a video sequence which has used many of the assets that we've been collecting from TSW Film Archive, but also images from the library, which we've been looking at for the web server. And we recompiled those into a video sequence. Now what we've looked at so far is a compression of video for work on the server, but this is using Adobe After Effects, which is a very sophisticated program which uses some interesting methods for compiling images. If you remember the first series in this program, we looked at the construction of time-based media as well as page-based media with HTML. And so I'm going to talk to James now about the way he constructed that. And we're going to be using this sequence in the after 11 o'clock, where hopefully Tudor Evans, who's the leader of Plymouth City Council, will be officially launching the site. And this will be working up to that component. So James, what have we got here?
Right, well, we're looking at this program, as you said, Adobe After Effects, which essentially is a post-production tool. It's very similar in style to something like Premiere and Photoshop combined, whereby you can edit different assets, apply different effects. And what I'm going to do is take you through actually the process of how we can actually construct something in After Effects. Now, on the screen at the moment, we've got a storyboard. Is what you should always use when you're constructing any kind of digital video, unless you have a stonking great big machine like a proper sort of real-time video.
Sort of Media Avid or
Avid or Media 100, exactly, yes. The reason for doing something like a storyboard is the fact that the machine we're using at the moment is not of that sort of caliber and that sort of speed, so we can't particularly edit in real time. However, what I'll show you is how we can actually put together some assets from my storyboard here. As you can see, we're going to have a sequence going on and see what we come up with. So here's the initial interface for After Effects. We've got all our assets here. If we can just click on one of them here. This is a quick time of a 3D fly-through of the Plymouth City Centre. We close it down, and we got some Photoshop files here as well. And the great thing about After Effects is when you bring in a Photoshop file, it remains in all their layer format. So you don't have to deal with issues of alpha channeling, which you do in something like Premiere. So first thing we're going to do is construct a new composition. And we're going to set the frame size, the frame rate, and the duration of the actual production. I don't know if you can actually see that on the screen. And we come up with like a traditional time-based format, which you may be familiar with from something like Director or Premiere, or fairly linear in its construction.
And this is the main issue with most multimedia design. Indeed, it mimics well, it doesn't mimic, but it's very similar to the construction of usual cell-based animation and the kind of transfer that we've seen in that technology to Macromedia Director and Flash.
Exactly. There is a slight difference to something like After Effects in the fact that you can do completely non-linear editing on the assets you've got here, and that will be shown when I start importing elements and breaking them down and showing how complex something like a sequence can actually get. So this is why you essentially have to plan beforehand, because very soon all your assets can become out of control and very complicated. So what we're going to do is we're going to import or simply drag an asset onto the stage. So we've got a Plymouth Reflections logo here, which is a single Photoshop file layer. And as you see at the moment, we need to set the background color. So we'll use the color picker. So here we are, we've got our image on the screen. And with this asset, we can actually do quite a lot of stuff with it. We can do some 3D elements to it. We can blur it. We can do opacity, which basically means the transparency of the image. And we can lay in different other types of media on top of that. So we can get quite complex structures going on here. Now, if you look on the timeline here, we've got, again, the typical timeline construction, which we can scroll along. Nothing's actually happening at the moment. This is essentially in frames. So we've got the numbers here, 15 frames, 1 frame. And these are sort of the timeline. I think I've set it up for about 5 seconds, the whole sequence. What we'll do is we'll break down the actual elements of this, and we'll try to rotate it to the right a bit. So we'll go up to the effects panel after selecting our elements on the timeline, and we'll kick up perspectives and basic 3D. And this kicks up another control panel with elements like the swivel of the actual graphic, and you can see now our graphics is swiveled in time. And if we want to create that as an animation, we basically use some sort of form of tweening, whereby we set one point of the animation where the actual object is rotated, and we set the first part of it where it's actually static and facing us. So the computer will actually work out the sequence in between. So
tweening, I mean, what's
Sure.
interesting in this is that we're dealing with frames, and frames usually deal with, in terms of videos, at 25 frames a second, which is normally the PAL video rate.
Yes.
Now, this is interesting because when you're dealing with QuickTime Movie, a lot of that is compromised because of the speed of the computer that you're looking at.
Sure.
And many of the things we've been looking at with the QuickTime streaming, for instance, is that a lot of these issues are to do with an approximation of these values. For instance, film, you can be pretty sure if it's working that it's traveling at 18 frames or 24 frames a second through that gate. Now, if you started dropping frames from that, then the whole process would fall to bits. The interesting about a lot of this digital material is that you can start dropping frames and maintain the speed of the soundtrack, depending on the nature and the speed of your computer, and also the download link. But this actual piece wasn't made for streaming over the internet. It's much too large.
Yeah, it's much too large, and it's something like After Effects actually can actually output to sort of film school standards. So films like Starship Troopers, even big Hollywood blockbusters actually can be constructed in a package like this. So you can sort of vary the level of output depending on the way you're going to deliver the material. So at the moment we're just going to be outputting into a sort of typical video standard. So here we got our swivel here, and we're going to just basically break down the actual structure. So we've got the basic 3D nature here, and we can actually insert a keyframe. So we've got the swivel command there, and we're going to scroll along to the end of the animation and actually set it to the direction we've got at the moment, and we're going to set the beginning of it as less of a swivel, so we're going to set the angle to 0. And you can see on the screen now that the screen is facing us. So now, as we progress, hopefully, along the animation, you can see that's happening. Our graphic is being turned around by the program. Now, at the moment, that graphic is fairly sort of chunky and not particularly brilliant, so we can
It's not brilliant, it's my logo.
It's not brilliant. We can actually blur it out a bit, so we can hide up the mistakes from it. So we're going to add another effect here. We're going to add Gaussian blur, which you're probably familiar with in packages like Photoshop itself. And again, what's happening here in our construction window, we're having the effects added to the layers. And this is just for one asset. If you can think of adding multiple assets and adding multiple effects, and you can see how it starts to get very complicated in the construction. So we're going to add blurriness to this graphic here. This is probably too much. We're not going to be able to see anything. So already it's getting a bit better in its construction.
So what you're effectively doing there is blurring the size of that image in terms of the edges that it has.
Exactly. I'm going to move it up here so it's not being kicked off. We're also going to set the opacity of this. Now the opacity is the transparency, and it's quite a nice little effect. So we're going to kick down the geometries and see down on the little panel here we've got opacity. And if we click on this little dongle here, we can scroll to a different point in the movie, and we can actually fade this graphic in or fade it out depending on what we want to do with it. So we're going to scroll down here, and we've got even more values. Again, it's getting more and more complicated as we go along. But because I know what I'm doing, it's not so bad. So I'm clicking an end sequence and a begin sequence, and I'm going to drag this handle down here, and this basically represents the fading in and out of our sequence. So if we look at our graphic, at this point, it's actually less visible than it is when we go to there, where it becomes much more visible. Now we're going to add another asset to this. So we'll just hide up all these sort of effects we've added to it. If we just scroll down, you can see how many we're starting to add to it. I'm going to add another sequence. We're going to add some video to this. So we'll get some of the assets, and this is, I think, one of the old Plymouth bits of video, and we're going to stretch this out to the entire screen. And obviously at the moment that's sort of black and it's obscuring our graphic underneath. Now if we just pull it in front in the sequence, so it's a hierarchical nature.
This is the same as director. The things that are closer to the bottom of the score are actually in front of the image.
Now we don't actually want all this sequence we've got here, so what we can do is we'll kick up our asset like so, and what we're going to do is point to the position when we want the video to come in and when we want to go out. So we can actually select specific sequences. So we'll have this bit here now. We'll close it down, and that will just appear in our sequence. We don't want all of it. And as you can see at the moment, it's sort of obscuring the logo. So what we're going to do is put it behind the logo, and we're going to set the opacity so it's slightly transparent. So if we do that and go to the beginning of the sequence, and then we'll move along to the end of the sequence, and we'll set the opacity to a lower level. So we'll set it about 30. And if we look at our video, you can see, and we just drag that down again there, you can see it's appearing in the background of our logo.
So this is effectively taking many of the properties of Photoshop and incorporating them into
a video package.
sequencing.
Exactly, that's why I said at the beginning, it's a combination of something like Premiere and Photoshop. So now we've got a sort of a structure here, we go in the background, we've got the sort of pixelated nature of the graphics in the background. This video was actually pulled in from the website, so it's actually had all the post-compression done on it. That's why the quality is not so brilliant. So again, we'll add some blurriness to that, so it looks a little better. We'll just add.
That's Ringo there.
That's Ringo. So there we go, and we've got some more blurring on there. And the final asset we're going to add is going to put some text on there. So we're going to drag our Photoshop layer in here, and we've got this Photoshop layer, and we're going to basically bring this in from the side. So we're going to scroll it across the screen. So we're going to drag this along into our time sequence, and we're going to set the position. So again, we can do anything basically with any element of this, and there's plugins you can get, so you can add your sort of lens flare effects if you really want it in there. You can do fire effects. There's lots of extra plugins you can put into the program.
So this text that you have here, what was that construed?
This is actually a Photoshop layer, so you don't have to worry about issues of alpha channels, which you do normally in something like Premiere. This actually drags the layer in for you and sorts out all those sort of problems.
So using the text tool, you've already anti-aliased the edge.
I've already anti-aliased, yeah. You can actually bring in any kind of Photoshop layer or element you want to. So what we're going to do now is just set the position of this graphic. So we go to the beginning of it and then go to the end, and we can basically just drag from one point to another. So we'll set those two keyframes in, and we'll drag this asset along the screen.
So you can actually see the trail that it's leaving behind.
Yeah, if you look at that, I don't know if you can see that on the screen, you can see this faint line there. And in fact, we can bend points in that, so the actual sequence will now just swirl into the screen. And what I want to do now is, we've got our final production there, we're going to render it out. Now this is something which you need to allow for when obviously you're constructing a piece of video, for the computer to actually work out all the sequences and actually construct it into a QuickTime movie. So we're going to go to Make Movie, I'm going to set where we want it to save, we're going to run me. I'm going to save that, and basically what we're going to do now is click on Render, and this is going to actually render through the sequences. And you can see in the background there, it's going frame by frame through all our little assets as it works out all the effects it's applying to the video. And this will take, it's got 2 minutes.
So it's not bad, but you can actually see each frame of this ticking by here. So you can see in the background the original Beatles movie. You can see the Reflections logo starting to turn there, and you can see the text moving slowly across here.
Exactly.
Now this compilation then, once you've constructed this, what sort of frame rate are you outputting it at?
We're actually outputting it at 24 frames a second. We can actually go in and actually edit every single element of that. We can obviously stretch the video so it makes it a longer period of time. We can effectively do anything we want for the video. Obviously, the more effects we apply to it, the longer it's going to take to work out and calculate.
Yeah. So how long? The whole piece is 55 seconds long.
Yep.
I know, so it's a bit longer than that.
It's about
a minute and something.
It should be, no, it's about 5 seconds in length.
Right.
In total length, but it's actually the elapsed time on the piece is actually taking about 1 minute now, and 9 seconds, 10 seconds. It's actually going up in time.
It's approximate, isn't it?
It's approximate, exactly.
Time. But in terms of the actual image size, how large is that movie now that you're outputting it?
It's probably fairly large because I haven't actually applied any compression techniques to it. So when I'm talking about compression and for digital video, when we're displaying it on video, looking at things like Cinepack for running from CDs, or Sorensen's compression, if you're running from something like a hard drive, etc. Obviously, if we want to output this to a videotape, we want to do it as the highest quality we possibly can get it. And that's very much dependent on the technology and the machine you're using. So we can actually now go to the desktop and have a look at our final construction. If we hide all our elements and look into our folder, we should see somewhere around here, Run Me. So we'll kick that up in QuickTime, and now we can actually run the final version.
Right, in real time.
So in real time.
You can see it curving there as it goes up from the bottom, following that path.
So we'll just run that again. So this is where we set the actual timeline, where it sort of swerved up and it just picks up at the end. And that's how we use something like After Effects to create video.
God, it looks so hard, doesn't it?
It looks so hard,
and
doesn't it?
the professionalism. Okay, what we're going to do now is move in a few minutes to the other side of this room where we'll be inviting the guests who are hopefully sitting out in the room there. We should have some press and members of the project. And Tudor Evans might be here, who will be launching this. And we'll be using a larger version of this to actually kick off the official launch with, and we'll be interviewing some of the people who are taking part in this project as well. So we're going to run the VT and see you in a minute. Hi there, we're back. We're now joined in the studio with quite a few people who are just helping themselves to tea and coffee. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Robin Durgis, who's coordinating the running of this project. And he's going to join me now, and he'll be introducing Tudor Evans. And we'll be actually launching the whole project in about 3-4 minutes, I think. Yes. Here we go. Hi there, Robin.
Hi.
Would you like to just tell the viewers what the whole Reflections project is? I've mentioned some of it, but if you could just clarify some of the issues.
Yeah, the Reflections project is something that's been financed by the Millennium Commission. The idea was born at the beginning of last year, when it was decided by councillors that we should have a celebration of the year 2000 that's based on history, on our culture within Plymouth, and of course our technology, the future. So the Reflections project, past, present and future, was born.
Lovely. And we're joined here with all the members of the project, but I think for the actual launch, we have a special member of the council to kick this thing off.
Yes, we're very lucky today to have Councillor Tudor Evans, who's agreed to come along and launch the web element, the technology, the future element of the Reflections project.
Right. Well, the web server is actually streaming out this broadcast at the moment, as indeed the satellite is. So what we'll do is we'll get the councillor across to introduce it and to officially launch it, and then we'll come back to talking about some of the assets with the members of the project. Okay, so for Tudor Evans, we'd like to welcome you to the Reflections launch. And thank you very much. Okay. Hi, thanks for coming. Right. What we have here is a small setup with James, which is the video he's been editing, and we'd like you just to click it and launch it, and maybe say a few words as we go.
Sure.
So if you move across here.
This is at my sort of technological level, so you just want me to press? Just click, and off we go. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Hey, here we go with the launch.
So it's this is now going out live.
This is now going live. I think we're still on air with the sound, Dave? Yes, we're still on. So if you'd like to just talk over this piece.
Well, I think it's fascinating because some of these films that we're showing on here from the TSW Film Archive, one of the key partners in this project, there is this vast resource of information about Old Plymouth. And what I like about this project is that it brings together the old and the new and the future, the very new. Together in one project. It's a remarkably innovative thing, and very proud that Plymouth is so innovative in this respect. It's one of the things that Plymouth people like, talking about the past quite a lot, and now of course we can share that dialogue with people all around the world. It's fantastic.
What we're doing through here is moving through all of the years of the project. Now you can see the Beatles movie that we were looking at before, but now maybe some of the more interesting aspects of the city, which was built from the ground up, and has a history underneath the concrete there, but is also moving into the 21st century in a very interesting way. For instance, with this web project.
I think the graphics on this are really quite alive, and it makes the city look very dynamic, and it is. But it's a beautifully put together piece. This is really striking the way the old film has been mixed together with the new graphics. It's quite a statement. Congratulations to everybody who's been involved.
Well, on the website now, this is actually going out, and I think we're cutting to where is he? Over there. We'll be cutting to this camera over here. So all of these elements that you're seeing now are merged together on the website, but also over the satellite program. So I think if now we could thank you for joining us here and launching this website, and we'll be moving on to interview all of the members of the project and some of the councillors there. And if I'd like to invite them onto the stage here as we pull back, and we'll be more tea and coffee, I think, and we'll be talking through some of the aspects. So as everyone comes in and has a look at this technology, I'll be interviewing individual members here. So,
try and stay awake for the interviews.
Yes. Okay, so if we go back to Robin, would you like to get your asset there, and we'll talk through that?
I'd actually rather not carry it about because it's extremely heavy.
Right.
It was designed to last 150 years, which it actually has. So that's
Yeah.
good.
Where's it from?
Well, it's actually, and a lot of Plymouth people will remember this, it's actually from the top of the last police box in Plymouth, which was number 14 box.
I think it just get run down by a camera, actually.
Which was number 14 box, which was at the bottom of the road that leads up to the Plymouth Argyle ground at Home Park.
All right.
Which was actually demolished in 1985. But luckily, the top, the original flashing blue light, was saved and was actually presented to the police at Crown Hill to keep as a memento.
Well, as a memento, it's extremely interesting in terms of the other assets that we have in this project. And maybe we could have one of the members of the project just to talk to them about the kind of material that they're contributing.
Yeah. If I could ask Nicola Moyle, who's the curator of the museum, and will actually be managing the exhibition side, the Plymouth People's exhibition side of the project.
Hi, Nicola, if you'd like a bit closer because I'm my aunt.
Right.
So you're handling the museum's contribution to this, and we had a very brief
Yes.
look on the website at the map for the
Yes.
exhibitions. And when is this actually going on online?
The exhibition is due to open in June, later on this year.
So, and that involves a whole range of activities that are currently active now.
Oh, very much so. The exhibition itself is, if you like, the past of the overall programme. We're looking back at the last 100 years of Plymouth, but instead of taking a fairly traditional chronological approach to the exhibition, we're looking at different themes throughout the last 100 years. So we will be looking at what health was like, living conditions were like in Plymouth, what homes were like in Plymouth, what it was like to just live or work, what it was like to play, all very human themes. And we've had a number of different programmes basically trying to get people, the people of Plymouth, if you like, that are living today, whether they're 10 years old or whether they're 90 years old. We're actually trying to get the people of Plymouth to actually relay to us their own experiences around those particular themes. So what it was like to actually be a child in the 1920s in Plymouth, or what it's like to be a child in the 1990s.
How are these assets being collected? What's the nature of them?
Right, well, a lot of them are actually intangible. They're actually stories. They're oral stories that will be available for people to listen to. So we'll actually have the actual voices of Plymouth people telling these experiences to the visitors who come to the exhibition, which should be good fun. But we're also going to have. We've also had a great appeal out to the people of Plymouth to help us have objects that actually tell some of these stories as well. Unfortunately, our collection in the museum isn't as strong as we'd like it, that reflects the sort of the social history of Plymouth. So we're actually very dependent on people coming forward with objects, whether they're false teeth or whether they're a wooden toy or whatever. It's those objects that we're appealing for to help us tell the story, in addition, as I say, to the oral histories that, themselves.
And many of these objects will be available on the website as well.
They will. They will. We've got a large amount of objects to date, and between now and April they'll be photographed and digitised, and then from April onwards, those images will be available on the website. And we hope that the actual site itself will be a part of the exhibition when it opens in June, so people can actually access it on that day.
Well, in previous programmes we've been looking at VRML modelling, and at the moment there's a diagram of the exhibition centre, but we hope to have a VRML model of that so people can actually travel around that on the website as well.
You can actually walk a virtual exhibition if you
absolutely.
like.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nicola. And so, Robin, who else do we have here? How about Elaine from TSW Film Archive? Elaine, come on, you're used to TV.
I'm being summoned into the headmaster's office here. It's a very odd feeling.
So we've been looking at some of the assets that you've already given us for the website, but this is from a huge collection of material that you have.
It's the largest regional film archive in the UK, but I was so excited just now to be able to glimpse what you've done with the material that we've supplied, because one of the great joys of the collection is it can be used for so many different things. And one of the big problems that we've got is people think, regional film archive, let's have a quiet snooze. But you look at something like that, it looks incredibly dynamic with the work that you guys have done with it, and it's thrilling for us to see that.
Well, we hope that the idea with the website is to link some of this kind of material together so that actually a narrative, the kind of narrative that Nicola was talking about, comes through with film which has captured some key moments on the 20th century.
I certainly want to go and have another look at the site now. It's like, I want to go and have a little play with it. So I'm hoping to be able to do that slightly later on.
Well, I mean, thank you very much for these assets. We've been talking...
Would you stop calling them assets? It's awful. It's awful.
These precious droplets of light. Yes.
No. Well, of course, one of the other good things with this site as well, because it's running for a substantial period of time, is that we will be able to feed more material in. And I think that's really great. And I'm also hoping that people, by seeing this material on the net, will realise the value of their own films. So they might well come to us. So you've got a lovely circular movement there. And it's also really good to be working in partnership with other organisations and people as well.
Yes.
And I think the great thing with this is what you're seeing what can happen when all different organisations come together and we're sort of greater than our parts as such.
Yes.
But,
Well, I think it's starting to work here, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I also think as well that we're looking towards the future as well, aren't we, all of us? And maybe this is a start for more work together. Hopefully it won't just end at the end of this year. Indeed, I'm sure it won't.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone from the library? Oh, hi. Hi, Jan. Jan Horrell from the library. You've been providing us with some of the images we've been looking at
Yes,
here.
I
You
noted
brought some more.
My special
Yes.
images. These have been in the files for, well, probably since the 50s
Right,
and look like it.
Yes.
And have very basic scrawlings across them. But the images are fantastic, and we know that there are a lot more out there in the same way as the archive is expecting perhaps more to come.
Absolutely. I mean, these are fascinating.
These are
If
just
you could
a
just
few.
hold one of these up,
Yeah,
so I have to cover
just
your
the one.
face here a
That's
little
all
bit
right,
with
I can
those.
manage.
Where are we? We're on. There we go. Can we see that, Chris, on here? This is of a. What is that?
It's Dingles.
It's Dingles. All right. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
So I can't read and
It's
talk
all
at the same
right.
time. Okay, that's fascinating.
Very well
And-
before it was furnished.
No, I don't recognise
Spooners
that.
and Co. is in Devonport.
Wow.
Central town.
Where
Very,
is that?
very old one. I'm going to have to look on the back. I've forgotten. Devon and Cornwall Hospital, now known as Greenbank, no longer
right.
existing, of course.
Of course, it was recently
Yeah,
knocked down,
and
so this
that's
is
right. That's where all the new residential development is.
fascinating. Spent hours looking through. Oh, and here we have a
Building
long
of
one.
flats in Devonport,
Right.
back in the 60s.
Fascinating. Thank you. How are we doing for time here? We've got 15 minutes left. That's good. So what I think I'd like to do, we'll be shortly talking to Andrew Harvey from the Union Street project about his, and also Charles Fox about the National Grid for Learning material. But if I could ask everyone, if you'd like to come and look at the work that's going on with James and Georgie, please do. Please mix in. If we're live and the cameras with the red lights on are the ones that are active, so if you try and not stand in front of them, it'd be useful. Thanks a lot, Jan, for bringing those, and thanks for your help with the project. So Charles, I see Charles milling around in the back there. He's This is Charles Worth, who's been very involved with us at STAR on the, hi Charles, on the work that we're doing with the National Grid for Learning, and indeed you're doing it through the LEA, are doing with the National Grid for Learning.
That's right. I mean, we're going through a period of enormous change,
Yes.
enormous development in IT in English schools. So the National Grid for Learning is putting computer kit into every school in the UK over a period of 4 years. There's the National Grid for Learning website with a virtual teacher centre where teachers can go and get online the sort of resources that they want. But also there are local initiatives, the Plymouth Grid for Learning. So we're collecting together in the Plymouth website the sort of resources that Plymouth teachers and children need to use to continue to learn.
Yeah.
And we've started to realise, of course, that learning doesn't just happen from like 5 to 16 or 17 or 18 if you're lucky. This is a lifelong learning thing now. With people needing to train and retrain for new jobs, and so that process is having to carry on right through the life, and through our local websites. This is the way that we can facilitate that.
Yeah. So you have a new member of staff joining you whose responsibility is purely to construct web material?
That's right. We've got a web manager called Paul Osborne who's joining us next month, and he's already starting to build the site.
And so far the distribution of the National Grid for Learning's money through the Plymouth Grid for Learning has been targeted at certain schools which have the ability currently to generate material.
Well, it's a 4-year project, so we're currently half the way through that, so we've got half the schools online. We're also, I have to say, working collaboratively in a group of Southwest UK LEAs. So we've got 9 LEAs from Dorset and Somerset, a little further north, right down to Cornwall at the very tip of the south of England. And we're collaborating on the Southwest grid. So we've got the teaching and learning professionals from all of those authorities collaborating to bring the teaching and learning resources that adult learners and child learners will need across the Southwest. It's a tremendously exciting time for education and IT.
And we've had a meeting already with several schools. I can't remember exactly how many schools are currently involved in this.
Certainly 11 or 12 came to that meeting, yes.
So we expect that to grow, and the projects that we're running through this can be actually seen on the website and downloaded. So we hopefully will be bringing in schools material.
Well, teachers and children now are both users of information and producers of information. So, this is the way that we can get a wider audience for our work, for our developments. And there's an enormous amount of excellence in the area. There are children and adults with enormous abilities that they can share with this broadcast medium. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to extend the opportunities for learning and celebrating excellence.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for joining us here, and I hope you can join everyone else for a cup of tea.
I'll go and have a look.
Thank you. And I'll be asking Andrew Harvey, who's around here somewhere. Andrew, here you go. Thanks a lot, Charles. Andrew Harvey, who's with the Union Street project, will be talking to me now. Here you are. Hi. Move in a little bit because we're on it. Okay. Hi, Andrew. We're working on a number of projects with you in terms of the reflections things, but also the Union Street project. Could you just tell us about that?
Yeah, the Union Street project is run by the Theatre Royal in Plymouth, and the Theatre Royal is one of the country's largest and most successful regional theatres. The Union Street project is a big community play, effectively, which will take to the stage at the Theatre Royal in August of this year.
Right, so how many people are actually involved in this then?
Well, we've not done the auditions yet, but the script actually calls for about 250 people on stage.
That's the play, isn't that? That's a kind of a soap opera condensed to a stage.
Well, we hope it's a little bit more interesting.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
I'm sure it will be. But yes.
And the strategy for actually compiling this play is quite innovative as well.
Yes, well, we spent a lot of time talking to people in Plymouth and about Union Street and so on, because Union Street, for people who don't know, is one of Plymouth's most notorious streets in all senses, because it's called Union Street because it's originally joined the three parts of Plymouth: Stonehouse, Plymouth, and I can't remember one of the other small towns. On the other
Devonport?
bit. Devonport, yes. Yeah. And so it very much at the heart of Plymouth in every sense.
But it has a reputation.
It does have a reputation, yes. I mean, it's historically, it's the nightlife of Plymouth.
Yes.
And it has been for a long time.
It's, what is it, a quarter mile of
barely that.
Yes,
barely that.
And yet it has a huge population of nightclubs
huge
pubs.
Population of nightclubs, pubs and so on. I mean, it's not what it was, I have to say, in a lot of respects, but I mean, it's certainly a very lively place still.
So, in terms of putting together a script for this, what kind of information are you gleaning?
Well, we had an amateur research team, volunteer research team, who went and spoke to a lot of people. We've had a lot of help from the museum, and people have sent us in stories. We had an appeal in the local press for people to send in their stories, and as a result of that, 2 scriptwriters have now gone away. And in fact, yesterday we got the first draft. It's a great thick tome with, which on the basis of that, now we can start working about rehearsal schedules and so on.
But as part of that, we're hoping to run some collaborative project using an artist in residence?
Yes, you've already met Elaine from TSW Archive, and with some money from Carlton Telly, and with your help, from the university's help, we're actually going to commission an artist to take some of the materials, some of the images from the TSW Archive about Union Street, because they've got an awful lot of references to Union Street, everything from a half-hour documentary to a 3-second news slot, and treat those images in whatever way the artist feels is appropriate.
So, well, this, I think, maybe some of the material that we've been seeing here in the construction, all of those tools will be used to generate this material.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, every luck with this project. It sounds like a very innovative and, very complex project as well. Yeah.
Quite complicated.
So, how are you going to fit all these people on the stage at the Plymouth Royal?
Fortunately, I'm not the director.
Oh, right.
I'm the project coordinator, not the director. So that's, well, in fact, we've got 3 directors because that's the size of the project.
Yes.
We've got 3 directors and 2 script writers. It's a fairly major project, to say the least.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
I think that's all the people I don't need this anymore. I'll be interviewing at the moment, and we're now going to have a look around and see what people are actually talking about in the studio. They're all gathered around the machines talking about it at the moment, and we have some members of press as well, I think. Well, somebody's got a camera there. So if we're going to cut to the other cameras and have a chat. We've only got 10 minutes left. We'll probably cut short in about 5. So if you follow me. Hi, what's happening here, Georgie?
I'm just searching for spelling mistakes at the moment.
Are you? Found some.
There's all these useful people telling me I've got spelling mistakes.
Trouble working with educationalists.
Look, we're actually talking about Plymouth spelt wrong in a couple of places. And,
You're kidding.
Yeah, and also...
it's my eyes.
Yeah.
They don't work
What was the other one? The big mapping is spelt wrong.
Oh. Whoever told me 2 P's.
M-A-double-P, it should be.
Whoever told me, but I can't find this Plymouth one. I don't know where that could be.
So at the moment we're looking at the reflections page.
Yeah.
The reflections themes, which is the stuff we were talking about with Nicola. It looks nice though, doesn't it?
Well, I actually went up to collect the check, you see.
Oh, right.
So, which was really good. We've actually got the money to do this project.
Yes.
It was really good. Yeah.
So, and the relationship with the Millennium Commission is all going nicely, and
That's
they're quite
right.
pleased with the way things are going.
I
Great.
think they are, yeah.
Okay, I was going to see what's happening around the other computer. Yeah. Oh, we're just having a photograph taken here.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Tudor. How's it going?
Well, the photo's going really well. We've only been waiting 10 minutes
I'm waiting for the girl not to be busy because I'd like a camera.
Oh, you want a camera there? Well, maybe we could orchestrate this while we're live on TV.
Oh, yeah.
Could you move the camera around a little bit so we could get a camera in this shot?
cover the dark, secret world of normally posed photos.
I'm annoying the director of the programme by ordering his staff around at the moment. See,
well, they're very precious, the directors, you know.
Well, they're actually up there in the little booth at the back there, but we've already included them in some of the programmes before.
So what does it say? Crawl on all fours before me. Is that the sign on the door of the director, is it?
Well, I don't know, maybe you use those techniques in the council, but here we have a very liberal and democratic approach to things.
Oh, really? So
well, he shouts very loudly. Yes.
Oh, right, okay, fair enough. Okay, are we go for this photo? Because I'd like to sort of... Yeah? Well, that's all right, because I was just...
Yeah, if you're chatting away.
Yeah, we're just generally chatting away, really. And
It's a very natural photograph.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we always sit like this when we're reviewing websites, you know. So one day we haven't had to do some sort of yoga.
Well, I'm going to end the programme now. I'll wander back over to here, and we'll pull out as the tea party continues. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Reflections launch, and also if you've been taking part of the Euronet programme, and please log on to the website, and we could do with some more people to set up this network through, so please take part in this. Thanks a lot for joining us, and please take part in the Plymouth Reflections site. So have a good time. Thanks a lot. Bye.